Today we are going, today we are going to address a pressing issue, protecting our Muslim-led nonprofits that serve as lifelines for our communities. Our masajid, charities, advocacy groups, and social services are far more than just nonprofits. They are the moral and spiritual compass for our community. They guide us in matters of faith, education, family, and civic engagement. When they come under threat, so does our ability to serve our community, defend civil rights, condemn injustice, and empower the next generations while continuing to use our collective voice and speak truth to power. Today, we're honored to host three leaders from CAIR who will help us unpack Project Esther, what it is, why it matters, and its potential impact on Muslim nonprofits. They will also share practical steps on how we can safeguard our organizations. In order of speakers, let's welcome Edward Ahmed Mitchell, Deputy Director of CAIR National. He will frame the topic and put it into the general context of the country. Farhan Memon, CAIR Connecticut Chairman, will briefly share the different ways CAIR Connecticut is supporting our community. And Saylor, Director of Research and Advocacy at CAIR National, will delve into the specifics of Project Esther, who is behind it, who are the targets, and how to protect our organizations. So, Bismillah, let's begin. Edward, you can take it along.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So on behalf of Brother Nihadawad, our National Director, Brother Farhan, the whole CAIR team, thank you all for inviting us to speak with you today, and thank you for making time to do this on a Saturday and for being here. It's an important topic, an important discussion, and it's something that is of concern to our whole community. So before we hear from Brother Farhan and Brother Corey, I'll just say the following, that Project Esther is just one cog in the wheel. It is just one part of this broader war on free speech, especially free speech for Palestine. We are seeing the federal government, obviously through executive orders and legislation, try to silence and punish speech for Palestine. We are obviously seeing colleges and universities doing the same. And much of what is happening is under pressure from either the Israeli government, excuse me, or pro-Israel lobby groups, and that includes the Heritage Foundation, which is behind Project Esther. Corey will discuss Project Esther and its details and to what extent it has been influencing government policy. But I will note to you that regardless of Project Esther, whether it existed or not, many of the things that are being done to us would be done regardless of that initiative, right? This is something that's been in the works for months, ever since the genocide started back in 2023. So a few things I will note and highlight just the major threats we face. So number one, the federal government. So President Trump signed multiple executive orders when he took office that very clearly targeted speech for Palestine. It is those executive orders that have led to the Department of Homeland Security to start vetting immigrants based on their commentary on Palestine, especially on social media. It is those executive orders that have led the State Department to start vetting students who are already here and lawful permanent residents who are already here and other immigrants who are already here, and determine whether or not they can be kicked out of the country based on their commentary on Palestine. It is those executive orders that the administration is using to then vet people who are not here at all and try to keep them out of the country altogether if they have spoken about Palestine at all. Separate from that, you have Congress trying to get into the fight. So Congress has tried to pass two problematic bills. One is the Antisemitism Awareness Act. This would require colleges and universities to use the CAIR definition of anti-Semitism, which encompasses criticism of Israel, of Zionism, etc., and make them use that when they're assessing whether or not civil rights violations have occurred on their college campuses. Many colleges, not many, but many have already adopted this definition, but it's not required by federal law. This would make it required for universities to use that definition when they are assessing complaints. This would obviously be a massive threat to free speech for Palestine. Now, thankfully, alhamdulillah, that bill was blocked because Bernie Sanders and all Democrats on the key committee and two Republicans, Rand Paul and Susan Collins, voted for amendments to the bill that made it very clear the bill should not be used to suppress peaceful speech that is critical of Israel. Once those amendments passed, the Republicans who were pushing the bill said, well, this is a poison pill. We're not going to pass anymore, which shows you the whole point of it was to target speech for Palestine, not anti-Semitism. It's still a threat. It could come back, but for now, it's being bottled up. The other major threat is the nonprofit killer bill. This is a bill that would authorize the Treasury Secretary to, on his own, without going to court, declare that a nonprofit organization has supported terrorism and then strip them of their tax status. So this could apply to any 501c3, a mosque, a civil rights group, a humanitarian organization, any of them. And so this is a very dangerous bill because it gives the power to one person in the government to just summarily declare, I think you've supported terrorism and I'm going to take away your tax status. Now, the latest version of the bill does add some due process protections. You could appeal it to court. You have a chance to try to contest it. But the problem is that the game is rigged, so to speak, right? Because the moment the Treasury Secretary says, I think you support terrorism, I'm taking your tax status away, your reputation is damaged. The process to try to recover that, to stop the ban, takes weeks or months, maybe even longer. And in the meantime, your donors have fled, your reputation's ruined. So the bill is dangerous. It's completely unacceptable. That too, they tried to pass through the House with the giant tax bill. It was pulled out at the last minute, alhamdulillah. And so that bill also is held up in the House. So I say all that to say these are some of the major threats that we're facing. And again, this all comes back to the Israeli government and supporters. All of this is about trying to silence criticism of the Israeli government. Project Esther, as we'll hear today, is one of the guide maps that's been laid out about how to suppress Palestinian speech. And there are many things in that plan that have not yet come to existence yet. And we want to make sure they do not come to existence at all because it would make a bad situation even worse. Last thing I'll say is that, alhamdulillah, working with you all in the local level and across the country, CAIR is dedicated to doing what we can to protect free speech in America, to protect the rights of our brothers and sisters, and to free those who have been wrongfully detained. And a key part of that, though, is just education, making sure that we as a community know what our rights are and that we're making sure, especially nonprofits, that we are dotting our I's and crossing our T's. You got to make sure everything is in order with your masjid, with your humanitarian group. There should really be no gaps that the government could use to come after you. And if you are engaged in activism as a student, be very careful what you say. Don't make it easy for someone to accuse you of being X, Y, and Z. And if you are an immigrant, someone who is not a U.S. citizen, our encouragement to you is to dial back a bit, not to be a vocal activist right now because of the threat to you. Let the U.S. citizen step up and take the hit for you. We need you here and you can support us behind the scenes, inshallah. So with that, I will be quiet now and turn over to Brother Farhan to share a bit about CAIR Connecticut, what they're doing to address these issues, any thoughts he wants to share on the topic, inshallah.
Thanks so much, Brother Edward. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Farhan Memon, and I serve as the chair of CAIR Connecticut, the local chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations. And our mission, of course, as Brother Edward has said, is to protect civil rights, promote justice, and empower the Muslim community throughout Connecticut. Now, at CAIR Connecticut, we do this by providing legal assistance to individuals facing discrimination. For example, we supported a Muslim student in West Haven who was unjustly suspended from high school due to a false accusation. And we ensured that his rights were upheld and advocated for an outcome that involved him being unsuspended and defeating an expulsion hearing that was taken against him from his school. We've also, just give you another example, assisted a Muslim healthcare worker in Hartford who faced workplace harassment and was denied religious accommodations, helping her assert her rights and achieve a favorable outcome. We do these things because they involve the actual civil rights of Muslims working day to day. We handle these cases quietly, diligently, and with compassion. Another area that we work in, of course, is advocating for inclusive policies. We actively engage with policymakers to promote inclusivity. So, for example, we've collaborated with school boards all across Connecticut in Stamford, Norwalk, Waterbury, Bridgeport to recognize Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha as official school holidays, thereby fostering a more inclusive environment for Muslim students. We've also participated in legislative discussions to ensure that when school districts discuss the Holocaust and genocide education in schools, that it also addresses contemporary forms of Islamophobia and the genocide in Gaza and Palestine, and thus again promoting a comprehensive understanding of exactly what hate is and its impacts. Of course, you'll be hearing a lot today about Project Esther, but at the national level. But that doesn't mean that things don't feel the same type of impact here locally. There's been a great movement by Israel supporters in Connecticut to put forth legislation that would impact the rights of free speech of students when it particularly comes to Israel and Palestine. For example, Senate Bill 980 proposed requiring Connecticut colleges and universities to appoint coordinators to address discrimination complaints and implement policies to combat hate. But while it aimed to supposedly protect students, it's crucial to ensure that these measures did not inadvertently suppress free speech or target specific communities. And indeed, we felt that this legislation was targeting the Muslim, Arab, Palestinian community and its allies. And so we went to the legislature committee, along with many others, to speak out against this bill. Similarly, House Bill 7012 seeks to establish a working group to address anti-Semitism in public schools in Connecticut. And while, again, combating anti-Semitism is vital, it's important that such initiatives also consider and address other forms of discrimination, including Islamophobia. There's also, of course, an element of community engagement and education. Beyond the legal and policy work that we do, we're focused on community empowerment. And so conducting Know Your Rights workshops across the state, educating community members on their legal rights in various settings is vitally important to the work that we do. We organize youth leadership programs, such as the Muslim Youth Advocacy Day, enabling students to engage with lawmakers in Washington and Hartford and advocate for issues that affect their community. And we collaborate with interfaith and civil rights organizations throughout the state to promote mutual understanding and address shared concerns such as the rise in hate crimes and the need for comprehensive hate crime legislation. So CAIR Connecticut is dedicated to ensuring that every individual in our state can live with dignity, free from discrimination and prejudice. And of course, we invite you to join us in our work on this mission, whether it's through advocacy, education, or community engagement. I'll put my email address in the chat, so feel free to contact me or our operation director, Hassan Awad. We're happy to have you volunteer, but also when you have a problem, come contact us and we'll be sure to help you. Thank you for your time and your commitment to justice. And now I'll turn it back over to our moderator.
Thank you, Farhan. Corey, please go ahead and start your presentation.
Absolutely. And assalamu alaikum, everyone. And I will echo Edward in his appreciation to you all for giving us some time out of your Saturday, right? It's a very clear sign of commitment to a cause when you're outside of working hours and you're still doing the work that is necessary to support that cause. So we really appreciate you. I'm going to speak a little bit longer than our other two presenters, and I might read a wee bit, and but generally I'll just be speaking. But I do want to situate Project Esther for you all and help you understand it. And to start with that, I'm going to add a little bit to the context that Edward was giving you, because it's important to understand that the Trump administration, one, is engaged in a massive effort to centralize power in the executive branch at this point. And President Trump has been very upfront about his desire to be the one who makes all the decisions. No more checks and balances from the Supreme Court and Congress. And they're doing some of this work through what is known as the casus belli, the cause, the excuse, of immigrants being a threat to this nation. And attacking Palestinians is sort of a subset of that, immigrants attacking this nation. So as we talk about Project Esther, I want you to realize that this is a part of a much larger struggle about whether only one person gets to make decisions in the United States of America and wield power, or whether we want to stick to this notion that the people are the ones who own and run the country. So it's just super important to not lose sight of that larger struggle when we talk about some of the skirmishes that are going on, such as Project Esther, or the larger battle that Edward was talking about, which is the attempt to suppress speech about Palestine, because I think the administration has sort of figured out that Democrats will not quite be as strong in their defense of pro-Palestinian voices based on the pressures that are behind them when they go out and speak in public. So with that in mind, Project Esther is essentially the Heritage Foundation's way to weaponize both its architects' anti-Palestinian racism and the concept that speech critical of Israel is criminal. Right? And I want you to hear that just loud and clear. They want essentially speech of Israel against Israel and its policies to be criminal. Project Esther's architects hope that the voices supporting dignity for Palestinians become associated with terrorism in the minds of the public. Ideally, though, such voices opposing Israel's apartheid occupation and genocide will be criminally punished or deported for their viewpoints. And I think all of us here agree that the notion of opposing anti-Semitism, the real problem of anti-Semitism, and not things like the IHRA definition Edward mentioned, opposing anti-Semitism is appealing. But Heritage Foundation really telegraphs its wider intents, both in the URL on which Project Esther exists. It says Heritage Foundation /progressivism/ and then the name of the project. And then on the website of the project, it actually lists it as issue brief progressivism. So Project Esther is an attempt to silence pro-Palestinian voices, and more importantly, I think for Heritage Foundation, to silence and dismantle progressive movements. The Forward, a newspaper, reports that pitch documents that Heritage Foundation sent out to potential groups to support their project outlined plans to undermine a collection of anti-Zionist nonprofits and progressive groups, right? So again, we're not seeing this, what the central theme that they're pitching is, let's go after anti-Semitism. It's anti-Zionist groups and progressive organizations. And they name some in the document. We'll talk about that in a minute. Jonathan Jacoby, whose organization actually fights anti-Semitism, told the New York Times that what Project Esther is looking to do is shift the debate about Israel's policies by equating anyone who criticizes the state with material support for terrorism. And this is his actual quote. It's no longer about ideology or politics. It's about terrorism and threats to American national security. So it's essentially, the tactic is a paradigm shift, right? We don't want to talk about free speech because we're losing on that particular ground. So we're going to say this is all a national security threat. And they do that by essentially defining anyone who thinks that blowing up Palestinian children is wrong as someone who is engaged in material support for terrorism. So I think it's important to recognize that, just as the Islamic State and its ideological allies grossly determine which Muslims fit their vision of Islam and then attack the rest, Project Esther's architects engage in the same kind of thing. Of the 7 architects of Project Esther, only one of them is of the Jewish faith. But what they're engaging in is saying is that if you believe in Zionism, your faith is correct. If you don't believe in Zionism, your faith is incorrect. And they lump Jewish-led organizations in with everybody else in their enemies list. So we told you who, we said we talk a little bit about who are they targeting. American, in the document of Project Esther itself, American Muslims for Palestine, Jewish Voices for Peace, Alliance for Global Justice, Tides Foundation, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund are some of the ones that they specifically name in the text of the document. And then in the footnotes, they add Code Pink, If Not Now, and some other organizations that are familiar to us like CAIR. But I picked those particular names out because you will see this is a broad group of organizations. Code Pink is Jewish-led. Jewish Voices for Peace is Jewish-led. In the pitch documents that Heritage put out, they named masterminds behind the movement they want to take apart. And among two of the names of the mastermind is George Soros and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, who are also both Jewish. So it is very much this kind of thing of there is an ideological test here. And if you do not pass Heritage Foundation's ideological test, then they're coming after you and they're going to attempt to criminalize your speech, or if you're a non-citizen, deport you. So I could go into the 7 architects that I talked about, but I think it would just get overwhelming to name a bunch of names and give you information about them. So I just want to tell you 2 additional pieces of information about them. There are 7 of them. Only one of them is Jewish. There's actually even a headline, I forget the newspaper that produced it, that said the project is essentially Christians calling Jews anti-Semites. And I thought that headline quite well summed up some of what's happening here. But for Muslim purposes, 2 of the architects, James Carafano and Victoria Coates, both have written extensively for Frank Gaffney's Center for Security Policy, a very well-known Islamophobic organization that if you talk to any expert on Islamophobia in the United States, they will tell you Frank Gaffney's Center for Security Policy is one of the core organizations promoting anti-Muslim hate in the country today. Just a couple of more points, because I want us to get more to what are we going to do about it, and then Q&A is always, I think, where we really get to what people who chose to give us some of their time on a Saturday really want to know about. So among my last few points, big name Zionist groups have rejected Project Esther. And I think that's really important to understand, because I called it a skirmish in among a larger battle. And I believe that to my core. I'll make a point in a few seconds that I think that will convince you of that. But when we say big name groups, the World Jewish Congress was initially listed as a partner organization by Heritage Foundation. They came out and they said, no, we didn't have anything to do with it. CUFI, Christians United for Israel, one of the most influential Christian Zionist groups in the country. Similarly, their political arm was listed as a partner. They came out and said, no, we didn't have anything to do with it. And the reason that CUFI stated, and I think that plays in for most of these groups, is because one of the things that Project Esther does is it targets leftist groups while completely and totally ignoring real anti-Semitism coming from the right. Right? Heritage Foundation is a right-wing organization. It wants to promote conservative values. There are many things within conservative values that are worth promoting. Certainly the idea of completely eradicating your political opposition because of their viewpoints is not something that any of us think is worth promoting. So big name Zionist groups have rejected it. There is no current evidence that the Trump administration has adopted it. And there was a recent New York Times article by Katie Baker, and that was also one of her conclusions, that you can see elements of it. So the notion of deporting people who are not citizens for their speech, and attempts to weaponize law enforcement against people who are engaged in legitimate criticism of a foreign state, as the document said, to make them feel uncomfortable. I don't remember the exact quote, but it was sort of this thing that was intended to have people engage in self-silencing. right? I'm not going to speak out because the FBI is going to show up at my front door, or the FBI called my work or something like that. And then as I wrap up, I want to go back to what I said at the beginning. This project exists within a larger effort to centralize power in the presidency, and targeting immigrants is the group that they have decided to make the bad guys to excuse this need to centralize power in the executive, right? And you've seen that in the executive orders Edward mentioned. It's an emergency, it's a crisis. We have to declare a state of emergency because of the immigration problem. All of that is not playing well for them in court for the most part, but that's what they're using. And American Jewry is rejecting, in many ways, this attempt to weaponize anti-Semitism as a tool to silence those who are opposing the Trump administration's exploitation of their real concerns, but because the Trump administration wants to undermine due process, free speech, free press, and peaceful protest. So over 550 rabbis and cantors in April came out in a statement rejecting what the Trump administration is doing. The American Jewish Committee is on record rejecting what the Trump administration is doing. There was another statement by a number of groups who represented all four of the major streams of Judaism in the United States. That statement included signatories like the Religious Action Center for Reform Judaism, the National Council of Jewish Women, HIAS, the Rabbinical Assembly. So we understand, and particularly when we're talking about Palestine, is the coalition of people who oppose what the Israeli government is doing includes Jews, Muslims, Christians, Arabs, African Americans, Asian Americans, you name it. It's a very large coalition of people. And then even there among the voices who fully disagree with our positions on Palestine are those who see that their issue is being co-opted by the Trump administration to advance things that fundamentally undermine American democratic principles, like free speech, like peaceful protest, like due process. And they're clearly and openly rejecting it. So I'll end on this. Project Esther is a concern, but I would argue to you today it is not your central concern. It is this larger effort to weaponize or demonize, pro-Palestinian voices, right? That's the bigger thing. Project Esther is one piece of it. Doesn't really seem to have a ton of traction in the progressive part of the Jewish community and many parts of the center and right part of the Jewish American community. Similarly, the same within Christian Zionist circles. Like, not all of those groups have bought into it and have rejected it because it forces them in the position of abandoning the left part of their coalitions. So not really something that we're overly concerned about today. But what are we going to do about the larger issue? Let me back up 1 second. One of the things that I will say, Edward talked about 2 bills that I think should be of greater concern to all of us here, right? To me, the nonprofit killer, if the Trump administration went after law firms and many of them, quite quickly bent the knee, now it's going after universities. And Harvard, for all of its problems with the way it treated its pro-Palestinian voices, Harvard has elected to stand up to the Trump administration. You've seen many media outlets make decisions about their coverage in order to appease the Trump administration. So those are 4 key pillars of protecting democratic institutions. The nonprofit killer bill comes after that last cornerstone, right? Civil society organizations like what all of us here represent. And so the idea that the Secretary of the Treasury can determine who gets to have free speech and whose speech he or she does not like, and therefore will get labeled with something that no one's going to want to donate to, is extremely problematic in American society. So, last couple of points. What do I want you to do? I studied martial arts when I was younger. Many of us did. Get a kick above my knee level at this point in time. Laugh at me if you want to on that. But one of the things that really stuck with me that I was taught, and I think it applies very much to politics, is worry more about what you're going to do and less about what the other guy is going to do to you, right? If you're active in politics, you have to be thinking, what am I going to do? What are my initiatives? How do I get the opposition responding to me? So I'd rather you're out there launching campaigns and forcing your political opposition to respond to what you're doing, rather than just spending all of your time responding to what your political opposition is doing. To me, a key metric in my work, if I'm reacting to the other team, I'm not doing my job right. If they're reacting to me, then I am 100% doing what I'm being paid to do, right? So I urge you all to think that way. Project Esther exists. We can protect ourselves from it. Launch campaigns. Take the initiative. Frame issues through a civil rights lens. When we talk about, I was working with a colleague the other day, and she was telling me she has a case where a stateless Palestinian woman wanted to go on her honeymoon, went to somewhere she thought was within the United States, a U.S. territory. Turns out you needed a passport to go there, and is now in detention. And I was being asked, well, how do we talk about this issue? Should we talk about it as, it's terrible that she's a stateless Palestinian? And I said, that's a problem. But if you think about the way most audiences are going to listen to you, I was excited because I was getting married. I've always followed the rules. I've always done whatever the U.S. government has asked me to do. But I may have stopped thinking for 1 second because I wanted to go on my honeymoon. And that had me go somewhere that I thought was in the United States, but it turns out I was wrong on that, right? People are going to be more sympathetic toward, I was getting married, it was a honeymoon. So you can talk about many of the issues that we talk about, but think less about what works for you and more about the people you are trying to persuade over to our cause, right? You always have to keep your audience in mind. I know I could say things to you all that would be persuasive, that if I walked into somewhere else, they would not be. I will always be honest. I will always be authentic to me, but I am going to uplift parts of my argument that I think are more appealing to the audience that I'm talking to at the moment. That is just good politics. That is good communications. It is what is taught in year one in any communications school. Definitely keep your paperwork in order as a C3. And then the other thing, Edward already mentioned it, and I will end on this, which puts us right at about where we wanted to be with Q&A. Never hand your opposition ammo, right? All of us are out there. I'm driving my initiatives. There are things that you can say that help the other team. I personally, I grew up in a family. I wouldn't say it was a big deal in my household, but what did I learn about Israel? Israel is this tiny democracy that is in a sea of autocratic Arab states. They made the desert bloom, right? All those things that people who grew up in the general American context learned. And when you're talking to them and you're saying Israeli policies are a problem, you're dealing with that years of programming. And it's very difficult to undo that years of programming. So pick programming that's useful to you, right? Honest and authentic. I always talk to people through the lens of I oppose apartheid, genocide, and occupation, right? What American didn't grow up thinking that South African apartheid was a huge problem? We're all taught occupation is a problem. We're all taught that genocide is horrific and a problem. So when I talk about these issues, I talk about it through that lens because I don't want to give my political opposition any way to distract from the real issue here, which is a civilian population is being exterminated. So there's my presentation for you. Happy to answer any questions. I realize, Project Esther could be a 4-hour presentation, so I definitely summarized. If you have questions, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you, Corey. Well done. Thank you very much. Now we can open it for like if any of our guests wants to ask direct questions, please raise your hand and we'll ask you to unmute. We have one question in the chat, so we can start with this. Margima, do you want to read your question or?
Yes, my question to both Brother Edward and Corey, as Brother Edward mentioned that Masajid and non-profit, but Masajid in particular need to be now more vigilant with these new changes. And understandably, we understand that because of their 503C3 status, they were already very cautious in the last 2 years with the war in Gaza. So my concern is how will this new changes further impact and reduce the role of Masajid in doing their role as in supporting, educating the Muslim community?
So I'll take that briefly first.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Corey. And sorry, I'm off camera. I'm mobile, getting ready for Dhuhr prayer. So right now, nothing has changed for nonprofits in the law. The nonprofit killer bill again has not passed, and so therefore there is no change in the law. Nonprofits only have to do what they were already legally obligated to do. Right. The key thing as a nonprofit that you are not supposed to do that gets people in trouble is you're not supposed to engage in electoral work, right? You cannot endorse political candidates. You cannot oppose political candidates. You cannot elevate some political candidates over other political candidates. That's like the key thing that, nonprofits absolutely cannot do, including Masajid. The other thing that gets nonprofits in trouble is just run-of-the-mill things, like you're fundraising in a state and you don't have a fundraising solicitation license, right? That is something that can get, especially national organizations that have chapters or satellite offices or what have you, okay? Another issue might be, you might think you don't need to file a 990. Maybe you do because of the amount of money that you're taking in, right? So maybe you're not filing some form that you need to file. Maybe you have unrelated business tax income you're getting. My masjid, I'm on the board here, we own an event center next door that we bought because we needed the parking, and the event center still functions, and that brings in revenue. Well, we have to file special taxes because of that nonprofits normally do not have to file. So there are these other little things that can come up with the nonprofits, and it's just important to make sure that you are following all the existing regulations and laws. Just make sure everything is in order so there's no avenue for the government to come after you based on this excuse, right? They won't really care about your solicitation license or the fact that a candidate showed up at your mosque and said something inappropriate. They really just want to target you because you're a mosque or because you're engaged in Palestine. So don't give them an excuse or an avenue to do that, inshallah. But I want to be very clear. Again, nothing has changed about the law for nonprofits right now. You still can do what you always could do. It's just the fear factors out there, but nothing right now as of yet has changed.
I'll be a little redundant with Edward just because I'm a communications professional and repetition is critical. You asked about masajids. So very specifically for masajids, I am not an attorney, but I know this from doing this work for a long time. So obviously any masjid should talk to their own legal counsel. But there's two pillars about what you can't talk about as a C3. One, as Edward mentioned, you can't endorse a candidate. And that means you can't be cute about endorsing a candidate. Because we've seen people try to get around it by like, well, Bob is okay and Joe, we like him better. So they're not meaning as an endorsement. They're not saying I endorse it. They're just hinting at who they like better, right? You just can't do that, period, full stop. The other thing that you can't do, you can talk about an issue generally. I support Palestine. You can't talk about legislative solutions, particularly as a C3. So what that would look like is you can say, I support Palestine, I support an end to the occupation and genocide. You couldn't say, I support Palestine, I support an end to the occupation and genocide, and that means support Bill HR 37, right? That is a specific legislative solution to the issue. Can't do that. There's a little wiggle room there, but let's just not get into it today, and let's just say don't do it, right? You can, and this is where it gets really important. I think the self-silencing comes in here, and we are leaders, right? Our job is to lead. The general public, the people coming to the masjid at Jummah for the halaqah and other things, look to us to see what they can do and what they can't do. And if we're projecting fear to them, guess what? We're going to spread that like a disease. So what we must project is confidence. And I say that based on crisis management research, right? A leader who speaks confidently, and just as a joke, they even tell you to drop your voice a little bit so that you sound a little bit more confident, right? It's ridiculous, but it works. A leader who speaks confidently will inspire confidence in the people around them. So you should talk about these issues 100%. You should tell your folks to get out there and talk about these issues. You should tell them to evaluate candidates and how they stand on these issues. You can say that, just you can't say candidate 1 does this, candidate 2 does that. So 100%. What is, the way I learned Sharia was it is be a benefit to humanity, avert harm from humanity. So we may be one of the targets of the Trump administration's efforts to demonize certain types of speech, but it is our duty as Muslims to benefit everyone around us by not allowing ourselves to be silent, by speaking up and speaking the truth. So just never, never, never allow anyone in your masjid to abandon that.
So one thing to add on that. So yes, second everything Corey said. As a masjid, when you incorporate yourself, you lay out what your mission is and your purpose is. And generally you need to align to that mission and purpose, right? So if you're founded as a house of worship, you shouldn't turn into an animal rights organization, right? Those are completely different, things. So you should stay within the lines of what you're founded as. Having said that, you do have room to support, city council resolutions, state legislative bills, even federal legislation. You can express support for those things, but the amount of time you would put into encouraging elected officials to support those things has to be limited, because there's a limit how much lobbying you can do. But actually, as a 501c3, you can actually express support for legislation, but ideally it should have some connection to your mission. There should be some relevance. So for example, there's a bill in the state legislature that's going to authorize the government to, make it easier to shut down mosques or something. So you want to oppose that, right? That would be relevant to your mission. So it's not like you can't be involved in civic, you can be civically engaged, right? What you couldn't do is say, Mr. Elected Official, support this legislation or we're going to oppose you. That you cannot say. You could invite an elected official to your mosque and say, hey, there's a bill coming out. We hope you will support it, period, without any sort of threat, demand, or offer in exchange. So just wanted to add that little clarification. You do have some room to be active on issues. What you absolutely cannot do is be active when it comes to campaigns or supporting or opposing people for office.
Thank you, Edward. Amunji, you have a question?
Yes, I was going to mention one point, but Corey talked about it, which is the chilling effect that some of these initiatives and bills that are being introduced on many organizations, especially the mosques. One of the major problems that, as you all know, that we have in our mosques, in some of our organizations, nonprofit organizations, is that we tend to shy away from gray area because we say it's a little complicated. Just like Brother Edward now was explaining, that even though you're a mosque, you're 501c3, but you still have, the law allows you for some advocacy, even on certain bills, but you have to make sure that you stay within the limit. They see that as a gray area. They see that as too complicated. Therefore, I'm not going to even talk about this at all because I want to protect the community. The other thing is that we know, and I see here that, some of the leaders of our community who are leading some of the most, I would call them maybe progressive to the front line, on many advocacy issues. Sister Iman is here. Dr. Ali Antar is here. These are leaders that I consider that they do understand and they appreciate the complexity, and they differentiate between where the limitations are, and they even themselves on a personal level, they engage in political activities and they make sure that they do that on their personal level, and that's their right. So it's the limitations is for the organization. But if you are an imam, if you are a board member or a board head of an organization that's a nonprofit, you can say that I'm acting on my personal capacity and engage in political activism. Unfortunately, many of our leaders, our imams, you don't see them in this public space. And it's such a disservice to our community that we have, in Connecticut, we probably have like more than 30 or 40 imams. That we only maybe see one or two of them that actually come out and speak and lead and talk about some of these issues that we're facing, including a genocide. That some of these imams restrict all their activities is about making dua after the prayer and mentioning maybe Gaza. And that's the most that they're willing to do. Unfortunately, I'm not accusing everybody. The other point I want to talk about is ADL. I think ADL is a very prominent organization that has a lot of respect, gained a lot of respect for fighting anti-Semitism within the general society, general communities. And they are working with many institutions, educational institutions, government institutions, and they are pushing for this narrow or broadened definition of anti-Semitism that includes any criticism of Israel. And that is so dangerous to our community, to the advocacy that we're trying to do, but it's also so dangerous to fighting anti-Semitism itself. And so what are we going to do with an organization that is so prominent that, schools, they take their programs for anti-Semitism, law enforcement, they use them for their trainings, and so many other organizations and institutions that do use ADL and their programs and what they are pushing for. How can we fight against that?
One more thing I will add, and then I've got to step away for prayer, is the following: that your masjid should also be careful about, and I think Corey alludes to this, it's public statements. So not even for legal reasons, just common sense reasons. So we have numerous mosques that not only record their khutbahs, they put them online, and they have their imam saying something that is obviously going to get the community in trouble, right? Something about Jewish people or Jews. Usually it's something that you should not be saying. But they not only say it, they say it at Juma, and then they record it, and then the masjid itself puts it online, and then anti-Muslim or anti-Palestinian hate groups like Memory then clip that footage, put it online, and now the mosque is a target of hate, right? Of potentially of the government, of mobs online, of threats and all that. So your masjid should also make sure your imams and your guest khatibs are exercising caution in what they say. And you should be exercising caution in what you put online, right? If you have an imam who gets up there and says something is like, oh, okay, that's problematic. Don't go put the video online, right? And make
they live stream sometimes.
Right. I wouldn't live stream unless you have the utmost confidence in your khatib and their discipline, right? It's a very emotional time, rightfully so. But if you've got a khatib likes to pop off and talk about, things in a certain way, that should not happen, and certainly shouldn't be broadcast online live or posted later. So that's one other thing I want to share. Corey's still with you to answer more questions. I'll try to join on my phone so I can pop in if needed, but Jazakallah khair, thank you all so much.
Thank you, Edward. Thank you very much for your time today.
In the chat, Huda's asking questions about the common conflation of, or the reality that Arabs are a Semitic people. And there's a well-known and well-trodden argument. I have been involved over the years in numerous iterations of messaging research. So this is where you actually put out a poll and you test different types of statements with various audiences. And then once you have some statements that seem like they work well or resonate well with audiences, you can take them and focus group them, which, you have a group of people. It's just like you've seen on TV, right? A group of people sitting in a room, there's a moderator talking to them. and then there's a bunch of people behind a piece of one-way glass watching the conversation. So I've been involved in a lot of messaging research like that, and just my conclusion, I have not seen research specific to this, is that the argument about Arabs being Semites just has not worked, right? So it doesn't matter that it's factually true. We're engaged in a public debate, right? And when certain arguments don't work for you in the public debate, then it's good to look around and see what other things are definitely work for you. I will say that in the public debate, our students have been, without a doubt, the leaders in putting forward effective arguments. And they are often talking about genocide, apartheid, and occupation. And they are often showing people, a genocide being live streamed on TikTok and Facebook. And that is what is effectively helping Americans outside of our circles see the problems that lie behind the United States' uncritical support of the state of Israel.
Thank you. Hoda, you wanted to say something? You can go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Sorry if I'm interrupting anything, but yeah, so my thought is this. I mean, historically, genetically, etc., Arabs, regardless or despite religion, etc., are Semites. And in a court of law, would that hold up despite public opinion? Because I mean, both, not like a lot of the Zionists, for example, are actually from Europe. They don't have ties to the land. So how could that be anti-Semitic? So that's really a really important point that I think people should pay attention to, is how can a Semite be anti-Semitic? And we can take their actual arguments and use it in our defense. And I think this is something that we should consider.
I hear you 100%. I am not an attorney. Unfortunately, the attorney in the group, Edward, as he noted, had to run and pray. But I can say this: I haven't seen a ton of lawsuits on that subject, which tells me the attorneys don't see it as a viable argument at this point. And I just want this. I do lengthy training sessions about messaging and how to talk to audiences. Right? Always be honest and authentic, but there are certainly ways that you can talk to people that are more persuasive. And just one reality of the human brain is, unfortunately, facts and logic don't always win in public narratives. Right? So those who support the state of Israel will always point out, it existed for thousands of years. It was their land all this time. And you see Native Americans going like, yeah, but that means give us back our land. You took it from us. And it doesn't resonate the same way. So it's not a winning argument, unfortunately.
Yeah, but the Palestinians are direct genetic descendants of Canaanites.
If I may,
yeah, you're arguing with you're speaking to the choir here. I know. I'm just trying to give you that. Let's think about it in ways that we see are working for us out in the public. And I know Daniel's been very patient.
Yes.
For us. But Huda, thank you. I love thinking about these things with people. It's a problem we need to solve.
Daniel, you have a question? Please go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. No, I wanted to pick up the thread on the ADL question and the question of taking initiative, because I think it it is in some ways a response to the last point too. I think we do seem to be in a moment where there's what seems to me to be an unprecedented opportunity to shift the kind of fundamental narrative on the question of anti-Semitism in the United States in relation to Palestine. Because the biggest, most vocal, most steadfast supporters of Israel right now are also very publicly promoting anti-Semitic narratives. I mean, you've got Elon Musk giving a Nazi salute, promoting great replacement theory on his social media. Donald Trump, saying, when people are chanting Jews will not replace us, Donald Trump says, yeah, those are very nice people. And then on the other hand, he's saying, yeah, let's wipe out everyone from Gaza, make it a beach resort, so on and so forth. And and so I think it's like there's this moment where there's a layer of the Jewish community, some of whom have turned publicly against Israel. Others are not against Israel, but they're turning on this idea of that any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. And so there's like this opening to say, well, if you want to fight anti-Semitism, you've got to fight all racism. The foundation, the whole fundamental Zionist idea is that there's something different about anti-Semitism than other forms of racism, and that the solution is for Jewish people to unite with the biggest, most ruthless racist power ever. And it doesn't matter, who you make an enemy with, as long as you're friends with that power, then you've got common ground. So, in terms of ADL, ADL, when Elon Musk makes that Hitler salute, they said, well, that's an awkward gesture, right? Like everybody who is just making themselves prostrate before power to try to get that kind of support is making it very clear what they're actually about. So I think it's tricky because I think stopping the genocide in Gaza and doing everything around Palestine is very important, but there's also this massive attack on free speech in this country, and there is this opening to talk about creating big united fronts to defend people from that attack, and that I think does open the door to talk about Palestine. So yeah, and it's when I talk to, I guess I am Jewish. I talk to my coworkers about Palestine, and I can see that non-Jewish coworkers are afraid of criticizing Israel because they're afraid of being seen as anti-Semitic, and I can't convince them on my own, like just through conversation, that this is not the case. But I think through common action and through building that kind of coalition, when people can see it, oh yeah, fighting racism means fighting racism. And, the Muslim community has been doing it for a long time. The Palestinian community has been doing it for a long time. Arab community has been doing it for a long time. They're actually quite heroic in doing so. And I think that right there creates some important openings. I know it's not the whole picture, but I think that's part of the opportunity that we have at this moment.
So, Hen, I'll quickly respond to him. And I see we're slightly over time.
Go ahead, please.
Let's blame Edward since he's not here right now because he had the wrong link and we started late. Dan, thank you for that. I really appreciate it, because I think if I could ask somebody to end on a point that I really wanted this group to hear, it is that there is an opportunity in front of us. And we were invited today to talk about Project Esther. And I always feel a little cautious about showing up and talking about, some of these scary things like Project Esther, because I am more interested in the opportunity that you're talking about, Daniel. So speaking not just to the Muslim community, but to the larger group of people, I think when we show up, not just talking about Palestine, but talking about everyone's free speech rights, talking about everyone's ability to engage in protest, everyone's right to due process, then those are the things that help the broader American public engage with our issues in a way that's more personal to them. And when something is more personal, they're more likely to show up for you and do things for you as opposed to just listen to you. So rather than sit around and worry about what the Heritage Foundation is thinking, let's sit around and figure out ways to make them worry about what we are doing. Because in our work trying to end the genocide, Dan is exactly correct. We are at the same time preserving free speech, due process, and all those other things for other people. And it starts very simply by going forth from this meeting today and actually doing something, right? Whether that's speaking to colleagues, if that's donating to MARUF, whatever it happens to be that you can do those things, right? Edward said now is the time for citizens to step up and non-citizens perhaps to step back because non-citizens are a bit more vulnerable. That doesn't stop non-citizens from making signs, from donating, and from all those other things that anyone can do. And by doing that, particularly in my book, when you work in partnership with an organization, you take yourself from being an individual to being part of a movement, because that organization can take all that energy of a bunch of individuals and turn it into a really effective product, whether that be in Connecticut or wherever you live. Turn it back to Hen and just say thank you all very much.
Oh, thank you, Corey. Thank you, Corey, and thank you everyone for attending today and taking the time of from your Saturday. And of course, huge thank you for our speakers, Corey, Edward, and Farhan. I hope we all leave here feel more confident about what we are, the threat we are facing, and know that we have to keep doing, as Corey and Edward mentioned a couple of times. We focus on what we need to do and know that our community is strong and we have the tools to fight this. So thank you all for your time, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Hind, for moderating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Corey.
Thanks to everybody.
Thanks for this great event.